Welcome to the Garden Path Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 3. Today's guest is my husband, Chris, and I brought him back on to talk about the bat house he built over the summer. It took about 5 months, and I wanted to pick his brain on the design, why he chose what he did, and talk about a little bit about why he wanted a bat house in the first place. And I thought it would be an interesting subject for a lot of our DIY listeners who may be interested in building their own house, but also for gardeners just interested in attracting wildlife to their yard as well. So you'll be able to see photos on the podcast page at thegardenpathpodcast.com of the final product, as well as show notes for finding out how you could build a bat house yourself, if you want to purchase one, that sort of thing. Be on the gardenpathpodcast.com page. As always, you can drop me an email at thegardenpathpodcast@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future guests. And I'm always on Instagram at the Garden Path Podcast, and I post several times a week. And don't forget, if you do drop by the web page, I do have a newsletter that I'm working on, and if you'd like to sign up for that, it's on the right-hand side of the website. So, hope you guys enjoyed this episode and are having a wonderful holiday season. Hi, how are you?
Good.
So, why did you want to build a big bat house in our yard?
Well, we have a lot of bats that fly over our pond at night, and they probably live in a lot of the, houses and barns and buildings around here. And bat populations in the U.S. are in decline right now due to habitat loss and white nose syndrome, mainly. And so putting up bat houses is a good way to help the bat populations.
They're being used mostly for like roosting and breeding and that kind of thing? Right. So, they wouldn't... bats in the U.S. either hibernate in the winter or go somewhere relatively warm. Because they're mammals.
Yeah. So, bats might come out in Florida during the winter or South Texas, but
they're in a cave in Tennessee or something, they're going to stay in the cave all winter.
And so that's one of one thing white nose syndrome does is it makes bats their metabolism, or it wakes them up. It makes them not want to hibernate the whole winter.
Okay.
And so many times they die because they leave the cave in the winter.
Okay. When
they have white nose syndrome. And so we don't have white nose syndrome in Texas currently. It's
a fungus, right?
Yeah, right. So it's a fungus, and it's called white nose syndrome because it makes their white and fuzzy, but
their nose white and fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see it. I mean, you can see it on their face, but it affects other parts of their body. So I just thought it would be good to give as many animals as I can a habitat here in our yard. We've got other, wood duck boxes and owl boxes and other bird houses and the bees and,
Yeah, we just
and
keep a general habitat, a wildlife-friendly kind of yard, so...
Yeah, and then so, I guess I got started in bat houses really because, I don't know, maybe you can help me remember. I don't remember for sure which came first, but when we moved in this house, one night I was out in the yard and I noticed bats flying around. I was watching, and I noticed they were coming out of our the eave of our roof, not our attic, but we have a metal roof, and they were coming out of the grooves between like the plywood roof and the metal. And so I don't remember if I put the first houses up. I think I put them up.
I feel like they were up before that.
Yeah, I think I put them up before, but I guess that really got me into them and trying to get them to work well. And so we've been in this house for 4.5 years. So, I've had bats in the house since about, I think it was the second summer after we moved in, like the summer after we moved in, that I got bats in the bat house. And I just had a few. And then the last 2 years, we have one in particular in the middle of the backyard that's had, between 30 and 100 bats, varying. And they had babies in the house this year. I think about 30 big brown bat babies. And that was in about late May, I think. Mm-hmm. Something like that. So I've kind of learned a lot about bat houses since I put them up, and like just their construction and how long they're going to last and the materials you need to use. And the bat houses that I have that have had bats in them are from Bat Conservation International. They're the 5-chamber bat houses. I think it's the largest one they sell. They're roughly that one. The big one is like roughly $80 to $100, I think, something like that. But they make like a 1 and a 3-chamber also. And I would recommend at least the 3-chamber, but the ones definitely can work. I guess we want to talk about
where
you need to put them and all that.
Well, yeah, I mean, where you need to put them, but I mean also like why you wanted to move from that to something else.
Well, several reasons.
What was the downside for those boxes?
Well, those boxes, so they're still being, one of them in the backyard is still being used, and I have not seen any bats in my new big bat house yet. So the biggest bad thing about those Bat Conservation International houses are the back panel that is exposed like to the weather on the outside is still made out of plywood. And so mine have been up for a little over 4 years now. In the back, that plywood is kind of starting to warp and kind of delaminate, I guess you'd call it. And it's eventually that's going to get worse and worse, and the water's going to start to get in there, and eventually they're not going to use it. It's probably still has several more years before that happens. But so if I would have painted those with exterior paint, if you would have put 3 layers of exterior paint on those, they would have lasted a lot longer.
You just didn't know about it at the time,
right? Yeah, I just hadn't read enough and everything. I mean, people online definitely recommend to paint them. I just hadn't done enough research about that. But the paint color is important. And you want to go online and research this where you are in the country. But basically, you want the bat house to be hot, but not cold or too hot. So, meaning since we're in Houston, it's a pretty warm area. I want it to be kind of a medium color, medium brown or medium green or, something like that. If you're up in the northern United States or East Coast, I mean, probably even Kansas and things like that. I mean, maybe not that far, but, somewhere where it stays cooler, you want a really dark temperature. Dark color.
To absorb the heat.
Right, so it heats up more because those bats want a hot place. They want it. It depends on the species, but I mean, they want it 90 to 100 plus degrees. So, and then, if you're in extremely hot areas, I mean, there's very few, less than 5% of the U.S., but if you're in an extremely hot area, you want to paint a really light color. But that would only be like if you're in really South Texas in the desert, something like that.
Okay.
So, it's super important to keep the inside of a bat box dry. They're really picky about that. So if you're going to build your own, you want to go to like Bat Conservation International has a webpage, and they have building instructions and guides and tips and things.
And that's for like a smaller box, like.
Well, it's for smaller. They do have some larger plans. Like they have one that's for communities and
Parks,
state parks and things. It's called I think they call it their Bat Condo plan. I mean, it's way, way bigger than even the one I just built.
Oh, okay.
It's like the size of like a small storage shed.
Oh, okay.
On like 4 telephone poles.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so for those of you that don't really know about bat houses too much, they can like really, really pack in a small house. Like, just give you an example, like my five chamber bat house is maybe, I don't know exactly, but maybe just say 22 inches wide, 24 inches tall, and only, maybe
not that
6 to 8 inches thick. I'm not really sure. Each chamber itself is 3/4 of an inch thick, so and that house can hold, probably, I would say a conservative estimate is 300 plus, and if they really, really packed in there, maybe 500 to 600, but they need some space to move around, and the top of a bat house is always going to be hotter than the bottom because heat rises. And so during the day, in the middle of the day, if the bat house gets real hot, they might want to move down near the opening of the bat house where it's cooler. And then at night, they'll move up. So you can't ever think that the bat house is going to be totally full. They have to have room to move. So another thing is when you're looking at bat houses online and things, almost all of them have vents on the side of the house. And they need to be kind of about a third of the way up from the bottom, just to allow some air circulation and really so it doesn't get too hot in the extreme summertime. You still have that 2/3 of the upper house that isn't vented. And then so if you imagine there's baffles inside the house, and the slots in between those baffles, everybody pretty much says the standard is 3/4 of an inch, but depending on the species, they can be anywhere from 1/2 of an inch to 1.5 inches. But 3/4 of an inch or 7/8 of an inch, if you're just doing a generic bat house, is what you want. And if you're actually trying to target a certain species of bat, you might make it bigger or smaller based on that. And there's some sources online that can tell you about that.
All right. So I guess, when did you decide you wanted to build your own bat house? How long were you thinking about it? Because it seemed like out of the blue, you're like, I'm going to build a bat house.
Well, probably since about last January-ish sometime. I started thinking about it. And I just thought it'd be cool to have, a colony of thousands of bats in the backyard. So, yeah, I thought about it, and I think I mentioned it to Misty in, I don't know, maybe April or so last year. No, this year. April of 2016.
I know.
And
it's been a long year.
And so, I had to tell her about it, and I don't think I really had to convince her too much.
I don't know. I was definitely a little, leery about it taking up space in the yard, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of going to be in an open space that we had, and I liked the open space. So.
Yeah, so,
So you began your research. What sites did you start with, like, reading and...
Man, I read everything I could find. Bat Conservation International, and they have a bat builders book, and at the time it was a free PDF online, but I don't think you can get it free now. But they have a bat house builders book. You can get it on Amazon. It's just, I think it's like less than $10. And a bunch of other state agencies and maybe a couple other bat organizations. And so I knew I wanted a house that could hold, thousands. And really once I started thinking about it, my limitation was going to be the weight, how heavy a house I could raise. Because I didn't have any way to build it up there. Sometimes, like when they build the huge bat houses, like if you do a search for the University of Florida bat house, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a huge, 10 by 10 bat house, 10 foot by 10 foot bat house. And they just built it they had to build it up in the air, with like cherry pickers and, scaffolding and stuff. Well, it's only maybe 12 feet off the ground, the bottom of that one. It's not nearly as high as ours. They have it fenced off, so they don't have to worry about people like bothering the bats as much. Mm-hmm. But so I knew about 300 to 400 pounds was all I could make it. I mean, and as big as that was my limiting factor. So I started thinking about it, and I decided on kind of initially I was thinking just a 3-foot cube, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. And then I kind of started doing research about materials and decided I wanted to use old cedar fence boards. And that's still kind of controversial in the bat house world. Some people swear that cedar will repel bats. They don't like the smell. And then other people swear that it works great. But most people that don't even think cedar doesn't work will usually say, well, cedar's okay if it's old.
And by cedar, are you meaning actual cedar or
No,
juniper?
No, it's a juniper.
Okay.
Yeah, juniper. Okay. What people call cedar. And so one of the guys at work was tearing down his fence, and I got a little bit more across the street from another house that burned in the neighborhood. So I collected some old cedar fence pickets, and I power washed them to get all the loose wood off and cleaned them up. And then I used, I used plywood for the outside, just like you would a house. And it ended up being the final bat house is like 34 inches by 32 inches by 42 inches to the very top of the roof from the bottom. So it's about what I was thinking initially. And it ends up, it's got 24 chambers. So, 24 baffles, and the pole runs up through the center of the house.
What kind of pole is it?
So I have a 6x6 by 16 piece of lumber that's sunk in the ground 4 feet. That's as deep as I could get it before I hit the water table. I just could not put the post any deeper. I wanted to put it like 5 or 6 feet in the ground, but I couldn't. And it's cemented in. And then on top of that is a 4x6 by 16 that overlaps the first pole by about 5 feet. So I think the bottom of the bat house is about 21 feet off the ground, which is pretty high for a bat house. I kind of did everything overkill on this bat house. Like most people, I'd say mount a bat house 12 to 15 feet off the ground, something like that. That's probably average.
It seems low. I mean,
well, it's not. I
guess
mean, a basketball goal is 10 feet, so.
I know, but I mean, for like bats and like interacting and having bats come out, that kind of thing. But I guess if they're on a public place,
and even if
blocked off,
they really can. If people weren't a factor, a bat house could be mounted like 6 feet off the ground.
Well, yeah, they're coming out of caves that aren't very wide.
Yeah, if you just have like a farm field or, rural field that people aren't going to bother it, 10 feet off the ground is perfectly fine. But, we have people and a little kid and cats and, all kinds of stuff. I just wanted to put it super high so that, to give, the colony the best chances I can of establishing a huge colony. So back before I forget, though, I was talking about the plywood, and I made it just like a real house. I did it with plywood, and then like hardy board concrete siding, just like you would put on a house, and a real roof. A drip edge with the felt paper and real shingles and all that. And
so they have a cozy house.
Yeah. So I basically just made up my own plan by kind of just scaling up other houses. I don't know how it's really going to work. One of the things that I talked to some guys on if you do a search for the Bat Forum online, you'll find it. You can get some good info there. And the guys on there helped me a little bit. And I decided that every third baffle on the inside goes all the way to the roof. So the other two in between every third baffle, there's like a 2-inch gap between the roof and the baffle, so that every 3 chambers is kind of connected on the inside at the roof. They can move. Mm-hmm. And then about in the middle of the bat house, between every chamber, there's a small, like tennis ball size hole somewhere randomly in the baffles. So the bats can move entirely front to back and sideways everywhere in the house without going out the bottom. They can...
Right.
And so they can... there's going to be areas that are hotter and areas that are cooler in the house, and so that's what I wanted. I wanted a big house that, I think conservatively this house can hold 5,000, maybe 8 to 10,000, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see someday. But that may, just like I was talking about earlier with the small bat houses, they have to have room to move. That's probably going to be the limiting factor with this house is, if there's 3,000 bats in there, they're going to have a hard time moving around. So.
And you're mostly still targeting the big brown bats, but...
Yeah, so big brown bats and Mexican freetails are the two most likely that I'm going to get in that bat house. Normally in a bat house, you only get one species. I'm assuming I'm going to get big browns just because that's what we already have, but... who knows? There's a lot of Mexican freetails around Houston, too. So,
you started it in May, right? And
yeah, gosh.
Was it... You finished in early November? Or was it end of October?
October. Very end of October, I got it up. So, the house ended up being... I did not weigh it, so this is just an estimate, but about 350 pounds. And you can imagine... 350 pounds on... 21 feet up. So that top pole pivots on the bottom pole. And so when I put the bat house on the top pole, it was laying on the ground, and I had to pull it up. So Misty knows. It took me probably
like 2 weeks to actually get it
I don't
out.
know. I was thinking a month, but it was a long time because I failed 3 times. This thing was super heavy. I had the biggest bolts that Lowe's carries, and I bent them. It was just a real pain, and I ended up rigging up all kinds of pulley and guide ropes and all kinds of stuff in the backyard, and I finally got it up.
Yeah, the backyard looked like a ropes course there for a
Yeah,
while.
I mean, I had
it was pretty crazy with
I had
tied to all sorts of trees
I had
and
block and tackle and like winches and all kinds of stuff out there trying to get it up. And
I mean, and you even had it like tied to your truck.
I just used my truck as weight, like to put my winch on, like the trailer hitch. I didn't actually pull it up with my truck, but I did because I didn't have trees in a few places that I wanted to tie something off to, so I used my truck in the backyard. And
so I guess we'll talk about failures. Did you have troubleshooting and failures, like building it, and then troubleshooting and failures, like putting it up? Like what did you realize like you needed to do to get it up? And
I wouldn't say building it. I didn't really have too many failures. It just was a long, tedious process because I made it very sturdy and didn't really cut any corners. I caulked everything and made sure all the wood was tight and painted multiple layers inside and outside and things like that. I have never done shingles like on a roof, so I had to like research that and learn how to do all that process. So all that kind of little things slowed me down. But okay, so putting it up. So the first time I just tried basically, if you imagine there was one bolt that ran through the top and bottom pole that it pivots on, and so the bat house was on the top of the top pole but laying on the ground, and so I had to pull it up. The first time I just threw a pulley way up in a pine tree, 60 feet up in the pine tree in the opposite direction. And I was like, oh, this is going to, I thought it was going to be hard, but I thought that would work. And I threw the pulley up there, put like a huge rope on there, and got the winch and started winching on it. And I pulled so hard that I thought the rope was going to break, so I gave up, it wasn't budging. It wasn't even close. And so I knew that wasn't going to work. And so I probably researched for at least a week before I tried again. And I came across, what do you call it? These videos of gin poles. It's GIN. And people use them for to raise sailboat masts and to raise hunting blinds and stuff like that. So if you do a quick Google search or see what I'm talking about, but you add a pole at the pivot point, and you pull down on that pole instead of pulling up on the where the bat house would be. And so I went and bought a 12-foot 4x4 to use as the gin pole and rigged up and that's when the rope started. I started rigging up ropes everywhere. And so I got that all rigged up and tried to winch it up with the winch and block and tackle. And that's when that bolt bent. I think it was a 5/8 inch bolt. And it bent at the pivot point, and the house fell back to the ground because the bolt bent. Well, it didn't fall. The house kind of, kind of slid to the ground. Not soft, but not hard.
It didn't break anything.
No, it just kind of messed up the edge of the roof just a little bit. So I went and got the same diameter bolt, but I bought a grade 8 bolt, which is just a stronger carbon metal bolt. It's harder to bend. So I rigged it all up again with extra guy ropes, like a tower has or something, so the bat house couldn't go from side to side now as much. And I reinforced the pivot point. I put a pole on the other side of that bolt, so it kind of took some of the weight off the other side of the bolt, hanging out the other pole, and tried pulling it up, and I put so much pressure on it this time that the 6x6 pole was 4 feet in the ground.
Oh, that's right.
It it leaned over in the ground. It totally moved all the ground with it.
Didn't we have a rain event too?
Sort of, but I mean, it wasn't. I let it dry out a little. I mean, I think it would have been, or not. It didn't. The pole didn't bend. It moved the ground, and leaned over. So it leaned enough that I had to reset it. I had to take everything apart. I dug a new hole right next to the 6x6 and just scooted it over, made it bigger around, put 8 more bags of concrete in there, and let it dry for like 2 more weeks because I just wanted to make sure it was dry. And so in the process, I fixed the roof of the bat house because it had gotten messed up enough that I didn't want to use it how it was now. So I fixed the shingles, and then rigged everything back up, and I just like doubled up all my ropes this time. I put bracing on the 6x6 pole in the ground. I put like another 12-foot pole, like kind of a brace that ran down to the ground, so it hopefully couldn't lean over. And then I ran a rope from the top of the 6x6 pole in the opposite direction, attached to my car, to pull it the other way, and it worked finally. So I don't know. I was pretty happy when I got it up.
Yeah.
So,
and you don't think like hurricane?
Yeah. So that's my only concern. I mean, it's only now that I saw that bottom pole lean in the ground like that. I'm still, I'm a little concerned that that it could, if we got...
Well, I mean, say it floods again.
Right. So if we got a tropical storm and it flooded and we got 60-mile-an-hour winds, it could fall over, And
then what happens with the bats? If there's bats in there?
They'll...
fly out, hopefully?
Well, they won't fly out while it's falling. They'll either... some of them will... If it fell, some of them would probably die when it hit the ground, and the ones that live would just abandon it and go find somewhere else. They're not going to come back to it laying on the ground.
No, just...
So, I guess my hope is that if it ever is going to move, it just leans over in the ground like it did when I tried to pull it up. It just leans a little, doesn't actually fall. And so if I ever see it lean a little, I'm going to run... guy ropes from the top, near the house at an angle down to the ground and make it like, a tower so that there'll be metal wires holding the pole in place. But I don't want to do that because I don't want...
That's a tripping hazard.
Yeah, I don't want to have to worry about those wires out there. But that's the only thing I can do if it ever leans.
So two things I've thought about... is mowing around there going to be a problem?
No.
Disturbing? I guess it wouldn't...
It could if it was excessive, but I think, most bats in a bat house somewhere get habituated to
noise,
the normal human activity around.
Right.
They could leave if you go shake it or...
Right.
I even used to, and I kind of still occasionally do, shine a flashlight up in the house, but I've really tried not to do that lately because I've read some things where sometimes all the bats will leave out of a house and not come back after you do that. So I've been more just trying to watch for guano under the houses and just go out there at dusk and watch them leave to see how many there are.
And that was the other thing I was going to touch on was guano. Is there going to be a buildup or rains?
Yeah. If we get thousands of bats, there's going to be a pile of guano under the house. Maybe pile's an exaggeration. And if there's a lot, there might be an inch of guano under the house.
Can we scoop it and throw it in our compost?
And so, when you have a big colony of bats, it kind of kills the grass where it falls that heavy. Mm-hmm. So we'll just scoop it up and Either throw it in the compost pile to compost, or probably just throw it straight in the garden, kind of not much because it's really strong.
Right.
But
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I'm figuring that, rain will also dilute it and that sort of
Yeah,
thing
but I
too.
mean, no, I mean, that's what my plan is just, if we do get a lot, just use it as fertilizer.
Okay.
I mean, it's really good fertilizer.
Right. All right, well.
I don't know what else.
Any hints or tricks for anybody else? And I guess maybe another thing would be is cost. Like, what do you think it costs to do it? I mean, I know you got the...
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I
boards
definitely saved a lot of money on wood by using the old fence boards. That was one of the reasons I used them. But for, everything, the siding and the shingles and, the poles were probably $20, $30 a piece. I don't know. I mean, it was probably like in the $300 to $400 range, something like that. I mean,
your time is the bigger cost.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like in the $300 to $400 range is probably a good estimate.
All right. So, and tips are...
Gosh. Well, if I was gonna redo it for sure, I would do a different mounting system with the pole. I think that's the one big thing I would change. I wouldn't try to raise it up like I did on a pivot point. I would either try to build it in the air, and it would have to be lower than it is, but or I've seen a few that are really neat that the pole goes through the middle of the house like mine, but it slides through the middle, like entirely through the middle. And so if you have a 20-foot pole in the ground, you can run a winch cable up on a pulley from the top of the house and back down, then crank it up through,
That's a good idea.
The house actually slides up the pole. So I think if I was going to redo it, I would do it that way. But just make it really waterproof. I think something we haven't really mentioned yet is location is crucial in a bat house. It needs, very, very minimum of 4 hours of sun a day, but 6 to 8 is better. It can't be in a totally shaded area. Maybe, I won't say can't, but your likelihood of it getting used is very low. And also it needs to be in a clear area. So no tree branches within, 20 feet in all directions. And that's for shade and also predators. If you have branches, the hawks and owls and things will learn to come sit on those branches and wait for the bats to come out and pick them off when they come out. And so then the bats they won't want to go in that house. They won't want to stay there because they know the hawk's sitting there.
Okay.
Color's super important. Vents, but really, I would think most people that are going to get their first bat house, just go online and get a good one. There's several guys that make good ones. I can't think of there's a new company I found that makes really good ones. Maybe I'll find it for Misty and maybe she can post it.
Yeah, I'll post a link of all the things you've talked about and resources.
Bat Conservation International makes a really good one, but there's another guy I found that started a business that I really liked, and I'll give a couple links to Misty and have her post them.
I mean, and barring that this doesn't fall over, how long do you think it'll last?
Yeah, so I think the weakest point of this bat house will be the inside, the fence pickets that are on the inside. And that is because the bats pee in there. And so those boards, at some points, if you get a big population, they kind of stay moist from the bat urine. And I'm guessing this house will last, in the 10 to 20 year range. somewhere in
I was
there.
going to say 5, and I was like, oh gosh.
No.
I do this again.
Yeah, probably 10 to 20 years, depending on how much use it gets. Because I painted it and caulked it. I mean, everything, the shingles and everything should last at least 10 years.
All right. Well, was interesting, because I didn't really pick your brain very much when you were making it, because it was kind of stressful for you.
Yeah, it took quite a bit of labor.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was.
It was
we had several floods and things while I was building it, so it wasn't like I was out there every single weekend. But it was.
But you spent a lot of evenings during the week.
Yeah, but I would say, if you're gonna build something of that scale, you'd probably spend like 4 solid weekends, putting it together, something like that.
Yeah, like if you're not distracted all day and you have 8 hours every day, weekend day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks for coming on and talking about bats.
All right. You're welcome.